It's a good idea to put a number of responses on instead of just making 3, especially if you have them locked in a position of full advocacy. Yeah, they're stuck with it for the whole round. But you don't want to put everything up front because they can just blip through the bottom answers and only worry about the top. You don't want to sandbag at the bottom because then they'll be able to group top responses again and skim over. It's a good strategy for everything. You want to link their off-case positions to their counterplan and be creative about this. The first is disadvantages. There are a whole lot of things that can trigger a spending disadvantage, a politics disadvantage, a soft power disadvantage. The reason why we write these disadvantages during camps is because we know that they can link up to anything. And if they don't link up to anything, we'll come up with a roundabout internal link scenario. It's quite likely that you have a card somewhere that says that consulting Mexico would cost money, or that consulting Mexico would infringe upon Cuban interests, or Russian interests, or Chinese interests, whatever you want. But look for those. It's a good way to, remember how I said that if their arguments prove to be inconsistent with their counterplan, they're thrown out? It's possible you can make the argument that their disadvantage then becomes inconsistent with their other stance. But the next, critiques. You want to link their critiques up to their counterplan. Rarely have I seen a critique that doesn't contradict a counterplan in some way. And even really good debaters screw up here. Let's say they want to indict statism or reliance on government to solve all our problems. All right? You could say that their counterplan references the state too much, so it makes a spectacle of the state, so somehow in them making a grand spectacle of how big and bad the state is, they're somehow investing in that. You can be really ridiculous here because these can be throwaway arguments, but the good idea is to put them on defensive against their own off-case positions again. Now the last is, on topicality arguments, there are some nice little tricks. In cross-X, it's a good idea to ask them why they're running topicality against you if they're running a counterplan. Why would you run a topicality on somebody? Cameron? Give me a voter.
Why? Give you a voter or why?
Give me a voter for T. Just a voter.
The rules said so.
The rules say so. Okay, give me another one.
Education.
Education. All right, give me another one.
Fairness.
Okay, give me another one.
Jurisdiction.
Okay. So if you isolate all those voters from them on topicality, they're giving a tacit endorsement of having the judge use that sort of paradigm for evaluating the round. So they've already agreed that you should vote according to the rules, so if they're topical, they lose. It bolsters your other defenses. They already agreed that fairness is your number one voter in the round, so they're only running dispositional advocacy or conditional advocacy. Vote them down. They're being unfair. They agree that the resolution should be the focus of our education on the T-flow, and now they're trying to detract it and shut down our education about it by diffusing the case debate with a counterplan. Vote them down. But the best one is jurisdiction. If they say jurisdiction, have them elaborate on how important jurisdiction is. Have them say that, the judge can only look at what is and is not topical. They can't look at your case if it's outside the resolution. Stuff like that. Well, guess where their counterplan is going to fall? It's going to be outside the resolution. It's a real nice way to just paint them outside, paint that counterplan as being outside of the judge being able to evaluate it. And I don't see any responses like this too often, so you might have some unique ones. I would recommend writing DAs for counterplans. Counterplans are usually pretty predictable. By the first tournament, you know what counterplans are going to be run the rest of the year. Somebody will run a consult China. Somebody will run a consult Mexico. Somebody will run past plan without conditions. Okay? Why not come up with responses to that? I remember on domestic topics, people will run a state counterplan. They'll say, have the states do it instead of the federal government. A lot of people just ran state spending disads. They'd say, California is on the edge of bankruptcy. Making them spend now will tank them, and there goes a fifth of our nation's economy. That triggers an economic collapse. And even if they're not running a spending disad, you run a spending disad, and you put it right there. You can do stuff like that all the time. And don't forget that you're a speech ahead in your established scenarios on case. If you have them on defense where they're stuck in a position of full advocacy, they are now the victims of their own time skewed, because they have to put down, 6 responses to a disad on top of pulling through their counter plan and defending all their other off-case weight. Now let's talk about advocacy D rules again. Conditionality, dispositionality, full advocacy. It's very important in cross-ex that you ask what their advocacy is. It will usually at least make them squirm. If you put them in that position, they'll usually put themselves in a position of full advocacy, and that's when you can exploit them for all the theory tricks you want, all the DAs and turn scenarios you want, and win the flow on the counter plan. But if they don't, it's nice to know that they're upfront about their position, so you can make all kinds of theoretical arguments. If you forget to ask, you can still hold them to another burden. Yeah, John.
What do you suggest they do when they ask and their opponent has no idea what they're talking about?
Well,
I've seen that happen a million times with judges where the smarter, more tech debater will be like, "What's the status of their counterplan?" They'll be like,
well,
"Counterplan?"
you could explain it to another debater. Most likely, if they don't know, they're probably at some beginning level where they'll assume all counterplans have full advocacy. But just say, are you going to be arguing this position the entire round? And that ought to be a good criteria. Because all of your claims against conditionality, you're going to make against dispositionality. So if they're not pulling through a counterplan the entire round, then you'll know it's dispositional. So, yeah. If they give full advocacy, the round suddenly changes as soon as they announce that. The round is plan versus counterplan, so your strategy is going to be pile on the counterplan responses. And the round can be outright won on the counterplan flow. Dispositional, that's when they have to answer the terms, and that's when you're going to want to really pile it on. They'll have to answer the DAs too. But conditional, when they can drop the counterplan at any time, the theory difficulties become a little more obvious. So here are some reasons why dispositionality and conditionality might be bad. The first is, it legitimizes contradictory positions. It allows them to advocate the status quo and a policy and revert to either or whenever they want. It allows them to propose contradictory positions in that, you can have a counterplan that's inconsistent with the DA and drop whichever you want. They're always in a position where they can advocate whatever they want, drop whatever doesn't stick, and go for it. I don't like that. The second is, remember how I said they have to meet some burdens of the affirmatives? Milk that for all it's worth and talk about advocacy there. Third is, it really does encourage fodder over substance. If people can just throw out arguments and not be accountable for them, if they can drop them at any time, yeah, everybody's going to make all the ridiculous arguments they can, see what you don't get to, or see what sticks. And that's exactly what conditionality of argumentation would mean. When you're the affirmative and you make an argument, you're stuck with it. Even if it's a harm